the case of discrimination toward the immigrant exists in our country and in the world in itself, right? They still being oppressed, they still being discriminated anyway. It shows you, it creates many victims inside of this kind of the discrimination. Even many people die, for example. We do believe this is problematic. Why? Because it even hamper the growth up of this kind of the minority in those kind of the country. We don't want it happen, right? That's why our stance is clear. As a first generation immigrant parents, we are going to live and raise our children in ethnic enclave in itself, in order for us to protect the children and make sure that the children can grow up as well as possible under our side of the house. There are several models that I'm going to provide to you in my speech. First of all, we will live in an ethnic enclave in itself with our minority basis, for example. Second of all, we still as a government will acknowledge the society by give clear information toward the society about this immigrant, for example, and on how we should respect each other, and step by step it will also acknowledge society to accept this kind of the immigrant in our country at the end of the day. There are two things that I'm going to prove to you in my speech. First of all, on the justification, why as the parents from the new immigrant, for example, it's justified for you to live and raise your children in ethnic enclave. And second of all, why the discrimination will going to be disgraced under our side of the house. Going through first is that the justification. Let's say under the context of first generation immigrant. You know, it is the first time for you to enter those predominantly white country with your differentiation, for example. In those country, you are as the minority. It's very hard for you to get acceptance come from local society. Simply you as a new person, which is also have a different value and even different different color skin, for example. It shows you that it's very dangerous for you to live directly with the majority for society. Why? Moreover, you live within your children. We do believe that under the context of the parents, for example, you won't give the protection toward the children in terms of bullying, for example, or blaming coming from the society. Yes, if government claim more of society already progressive and try to accept them themselves, for example, but why this is not enough? First of all, not all the society has progressive enough. Moreover, there is no legal protection from government to protect yourself, to protect your children even from the blaming or even the discrimination that exists. It shows you it's very risky for you to live directly within the society. Second of all, even if most of parents are progressive, but discrimination from the children of the majority will going to be exist. That lack of information about the children immigrant, for example, it shows you that the probability to getting the bullying of this kind of children still big under the side of the house. Why this is bad? Because the moment they getting a pressure, for example, they get the bullying, it will very worse toward their mentality. It will even broke their mentality of the children in itself. It shows you, it will make the children even afraid to go out from their house to enter the school, for example. Why that is so bad? At the end of the day, the improvement that this kind of the parent want at the very first place will not going to be exist anyway. Even if they also can enter the education, for example, they can go out, but they cannot enjoy those kind of the education simply because the fairness coming from their self because of the discrimination that still exists inside our current status quo. We don't want that. Moreover, this kind of the children is that the investment coming from their parents, the most hope coming from their parents to continue their generation, for example, to also provide a better life for their family. That's the time they enter the education. Enter the education, they also can enter the job because they have specific skill, for example, and so on and so forth. That's the time, the moment they can enter the job, it shows you they will also have a settled income. It shows you the moment they have a settled income, they also can provide their daily need and so on and so forth. Moreover, the reason why they move toward this kind of country because of the lack of economic issues that exist inside of their family. Therefore, they move toward this kind of the country. Hopefully, they can get a better economic and get a better facility, for example, coming from this kind of the country. For example, the reason why Mexico society moved to the US, for example, because they do believe in the US, they will have a good facility. They will have a good education system, for example, and so stuff that can even improve their self and giving more knowledge for them to get a better life at the end of the day. That's why, in order for you to save your children, it's better for you to live in ethnic enclave in itself in order to ensure your children will grow up as well as possible. That's why, as a parents, it is very justified for you to live in the ethnic of enclave in this kind of particular predominantly white country in itself. But going to the second substantive, on how the discrimination case will going to be discussed under our side of the house. What you need to understand, the reason why the discrimination exists, because the society directly face a new immigrant, because the society even doesn't have a clear information about the immigrant. It's very hard for the society to accept the value of immigrant, because simply they have a different value. Moreover, they have a different appearance, for example, that's very hard for this kind of majority to understanding the reason why there is the differentiation in itself. It shows you that the protection that exists in current status quo is really risky for this kind of parents to rise and leave their children in the predominantly major society in itself. Therefore, what we are under opening government is that make sure that this kind of the minority, which is the parents, live and raise their children as secure as possible, right? The moment they live within their ethnic, for example, there is no rejection, there is no discrimination toward the children, simply because they live with their basis in itself, right? It shows you that the discrimination in itself will not going to be happen under our side of the house. But look, what government will provide in those kind of situation is that acknowledge society first, acknowledge the society, giving the information, giving the knowledge on how we should respect each other, even if there is this differentiation about the depth value and also the skin in itself. The moment this kind of the children safe, for example, they can enjoy their school, for example. They can enjoy their daily activity. They not fear to getting a bullying and so on and so far. It shows you the moment they can enter the education and they can graduate it, for example, it will very easy for them to get acknowledged. And the moment they rise as a juvenile, for example, their mental has already enough to face the majority society, to face the majority society. Therefore, even if at the end of the day they're still getting the discrimination or even getting the bullying coming from the society, we do believe that their mental already enough to face this kind of the problem. Therefore, the betterment that this kind of the parent want at the very first place will going to be achieved under our side of the house. We're very proud to propose.
You've been suffering for a long time in your home countries. When you have been saving, I think it's better for you to creating betterment for your survivability at the end of the day. Opening government stand in this debate to creating betterment by these immigrants to survive for their child and also for their future journey at the end of the day. Two things that I'm going to argue on my speech. Firstly, why it is very important for you as the first generation immigrant parents to live in an ethnic enclave. Secondly, when you concentrate in one place, why government will realize with your existence at the end of the day. Going to the first, why it is very important for you as the first generation immigrant parents to live in an ethnic enclave. Bagas has been told you that you have a different characterization of majority to survive, because the most reason why people being immigrant in current status quo is because the economic reason. They want to have better development, for example, to cut their poor cycle that coming from their home countries in the past. And that purpose can only happen if you have good connection and people who know you as well as a part of human that have same background as and characterization to hear you and share the job opportunity that exists, for example. And that can only happen if those kind of people hear and cares with yourself, ladies and gentlemen. But in terms of live in stranger's place, you need to know their characterization to get acknowledged, right? Meanwhile, it is hard for you because you still culture shock with their own behaviors, for example. It is even hard for you to socialization with themselves. It is also hard for you to getting acknowledged in the very first time because you are different of appearance, for example, and cultures that of course your behaviors also not easier to connect with the majority behaviors that have different starting point to begin with. What does it mean? It means when you live inside that place with a big basis of majority, number one, they will not care with yourself anyway because you have different appearance and different characterization. So even if there is job information, I don't think they will give to you, and because you are a strangers and do not have any kind of bonding to prioritize by those kind of majority. What is the comparison? Under the house, you live as one, as unity that have some characterization to have better life as an immigrant in itself, which you have better access to have good bonding as one, as unity, right? When you being suffer, for example, because you have getting an attackment and so on and so forth, your minority basis will hear yourself, will protect and support yourself to realize on, to having a to feel secure with the existence of their own self. That protection will creating betterment on those kind of minority. So the survivability of this minority will better to cater because there is umbrella for you to decrease the burden by God so many rejection of job requirement and also oppression by majority in itself. This umbrella can even better for you to have a development at the end of the day because you will prioritize as a part as minority in itself. But secondly, talking about the case of oppression by minority that Bagas has been told you, because black people in current situation as always seen as low casta, as seen as a low casta of human since the very beginning, right? When you live in big basis of your family, I think your child will school inside one umbrella, right? You will have big basis in the school, for example. So we can cater the degree of oppression that happen in current situation because in status quo, the reason psychically oppression happen because you live separated with your basis. Meanwhile, the majority of white people feel that they have big power to oppress yourself because they have big basis in itself, right? Under the house, we have portrayal as a big basis in one umbrella, so the majority fears to attack yourself directly because the fact that you live in one school, for example, that have big basis also, so that it's impossible for white people to even condemn yourself at the end of the day. I think the attention by minority, I think the attention by majority not will going to be happen under opening government because of why? Because this minority will surrounded by their much basis, right? So the majority will realize on the fairness when they attack those kind of minority, they will also get attacked by those kind of minority basis at the end of the day. So the degree of oppression will cater under opening government. Even if opposition claim that under the house is create narrative about the selfishness of those minority, I think that is exactly being the time to creating betterment in our side of the house. Because why? Because when that narrative happen, there is the discourse in our majority about how suffering this minority in the past. They will realize on why we are separate with those kind of majority. They was creating the discourse and checks and balance inside those majority about our suffering in the past. They concentrate as one basis because our oppression, because our oppression in the past, for example, this discourse will slowly triggers majority about their failure in the past to responsibility in the future, for example, to be much care, because the fact that there is not humanity when we separate those kind of people as a part of citizen in this nation. They should also have same opportunity and same right in these countries, ladies and gentlemen. In opposite side of the house, I think that is impossible to happen, right? Because there is no self-reflection about majority selfishness, about the oppression that happened in the United States of America, because there is no situation that push themselves to realize about our sovereignty in the past. Even if there is existence of movement that speak up, there is no majority will hear with you because the fact they have a toxic minded in the very first time. That's how under the house those toxic minded will changing because the fact there is a push by this basis to make the majority realize with your failure in the past, right? But secondly, what is beneficial for your future journey as minority in these countries? Because when you concentrate in one umbrella, government will realize with your existence that will bigger with the time, with the running time, right? Because when you live as one, I think the development will portray with your particular behaviors. Like you also will having a lot of baby, for example, the government will realize with your basis at the end of the day. When your basis bigger in the futures, like immigrant in the United States of America, of course it will take attention by every politician to take the voter by your basis at the end of the day. That is the reason why in the past Trump and also Hillary Clinton trying to open to campaign about the protection of immigrant in itself, because they realize that the existence of this immigrant will also beneficial for their own self. So at the end of the day, government will also creating policy for your betterment at the end of the day, like protection of minority, like also giving exclusivity and so on and so forth. We very proud to propose.